LSU at Texas A&M, SEC showdown, and it's a big one, man. This is a really, really big game. A couple of teams that are undefeated in the SEC at this point. LSU is coming into their own. This is the best version of LSU that we've seen, I think, since the national championship, right? I mean, you could maybe say Brian Kelly's first season, but I don't know. I don't know. I think this team might have an edge on that team. Defensively, LSU and Blake Baker have figured out a way to get guys in position to make plays, and that's with injuries going on and everything. I mean, Harold Perkins being out, Weeks steps up, and he's been playing just absolutely out of his mind. Um, the defensive line has played a whole lot better than what I thought they would coming out of the preseason. It was much talked about amongst LSU fans, and there's several LSU pages that I follow and listen to. And LSU fans were absolutely beside themselves. The fact that they couldn't get a defensive line transfer, specifically interior, to come in the offseason and provide some help in that room. I'm really impressed with what the group's been able to do thus far. It's going to be a really Texas A&M is a running football team at this point. Now, that not to say they can't throw the football. I'm not saying that. We watched Texas A&M versus Missouri, and I think we saw a different side of Texas A&M's offense that we had not seen with Connor Wegman coming back from injury again. Uh, uh, Being able to come in and really give that team a lift that Marcel Reed wasn't able to do. I think this is a big matchup. I'm really interested to see how this Texas A&M front seven matches up with LSU. We saw LSU last week be able to run the football or at least have some semblance of a run game with Durham. And I think that's really, really imperative in this game. I think you've got to be able to strike some type of balance. We saw and LSU and Georgia both this weekend be able to utilize the run game enough to bring defenses in and then be able to hit over the top a little bit and hit some of those explosive pass plays. And LSU has been one of the most explosive teams in the pass game all season. So if you're looking for a box to check and say we're good there, I'd say that's it for LSU. I said I'm interested to see how the front seven it matches up against LSU. But one of the biggest questions, obviously, in this football game with the style of football that LSU plays on offense is how does this Texas A&M secondary match up against these wide receivers for LSU? And I think it's the most basic question about this game. I think it's the number one question that people are going to ask. What are your thoughts on this football game? Well, I'm gonna pull up these schedules. I had them pulled up here, and then I think I exited out on my phone. So I'm gonna pull these schedules up, and we'll kind of talk about the opponents that these teams have played. Um, Texas A&M hasn't played a team that throws the ball very well. They played one this
Yeah.
past weekend in Mississippi State, and it was a bit of a struggle. Um, so I'm interested to see how that secondary is going to respond this week. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I'm with you. I mean, that was kind of going to be my point as far as the matchup in this game. Look, I really like what LSU is doing right now. I think they are the new hot shiny toy in the SEC with them stacking up a couple of really impressive wins the past 2 weeks. You cannot deny that this LSU defense looks much better. They're playing like a 2007 LSU defense finally. Now they didn't start
Hmm.
the season playing like that. We all watched the USC game early in the season, and we saw what happened to LSU in that game. Defensively, which they did look much better than 2023, but not
A
playing
lot of
nearly at the
yards.
level that they are now. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
yards. It was kind of a shootout. But now I'm looking at this LSU team and this LSU defense and the transformation that it's undergone, and I'm saying, man, this is a team that can, if they, especially if they continue to get better and play more cohesive as a unit, build some confidence on that side of the football. I think that's something that has been lacking for quite some time for LSU. If they can continue to do that, I really feel like this LSU team could win the SEC. And I know I'm really not trying to just speak in hyperbole or just give you some hot take. Like, just sit down and watch them play. man. The defense has changed this team dramatically, and the offense. uh, I mean, you're missing Jalen Daniels. I think that was more um, of a factor early in the season, but now under Garrett Nussmeier, with the experience that he has in the program, in the system, and Kyron Lacey playing really well right now, Aaron Anderson playing really well, Mason Taylor he continues to look like one of the best tight ends in the country. And they got a true freshman running the football finally in Caden Durham. I mean, it's a complete team now. And I do think that they still have to clean some things up in the secondary. We didn't see Arkansas really be able to test them on the back end, but they were doing such a good job in run block, or in run protection, I should say, with their rush defense, and bringing four, that nothing was open on the back end. So Taylon Green
Mm-hmm.
not being a third and fourth read quarterback was not finding open receivers in that defense, and that just speaks to the push that they're getting up front on the defensive line. On the edge, they're just flying around the football, looking really, really tough to beat. Now, after I've glazed LSU as much as anybody's going to glaze LSU right now at this point in the season, I think. Also look at Texas A&M, and I'm sure that some fans around college football are looking at the Mississippi State game and saying, "Man, how you give up 24 to Mississippi State?" Well, I mean, Mississippi State, first of all, credit them and the way that they're playing right now, because the past three games that they've had to play are not easy. You had Texas, Georgia, and Texas A&M. My gosh, like what a tough schedule. And go look at their schedule, man. It gets tougher. I mean, well, it doesn't get tougher, but there's no let up. I mean, they've got Missouri later in the year. They got Ole Miss, of course. I mean, it's a murderer's row for Mississippi State. So if you want to talk about how tough your schedule is, you're not going to get any sympathy from those Bulldog fans over there. But I say that to say, Mississippi State scored 24 on Texas A&M. Nobody really expected them to score that much. Nobody expected them to score 34 on Georgia either. Like, at some point, nobody expected them to play Texas close. At some point, you really have to look at the offense and the job that Jeff Lebby is doing and saying, okay, this is a quality offense, right? Their defense is terrible. Their defense is absolutely terrible. But the offense is pretty good. I think that they're pretty good. The defense does have Stone Blanton, which I think is a highly underrated middle linebacker, but I digress. Overall, their defense is pretty tough, or it's pretty bad. So for Texas A&M, it's I say that to say it's really tough to gauge that game. The Mississippi, anytime anybody plays Mississippi State, it's going to be tough to gauge that game and get an understanding of what your team is, right? If you're the one facing Mississippi State, I almost want to just kind of excuse that game in a sense, because I think that more data is needed on a young Jeff Lebby team to really understand kind of what you're going up against. But I go back to the Missouri game, and granted, that was a flawless game by Texas A&M, and I know you could point at a thing, something here or there where things got a little bit sloppy, but it was about as good a football game as you could have played. I mean, let's be honest. Connor Wegman's 80% passing the football. I mean, just looked absolutely efficient. Best game I've seen him play personally, and
Ran the football really well. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you're 80% of that, right? Because you can't expect to do that week in and week out. You just can't. It was a flawless game, like I said. If you're 80% of that, what's your chances against LSU, right? Assuming that they play at 80% of their potential, which I still don't think LSU has played a full game yet this year. But what's your chances? Well, Vegas says it's 3 points. So your Vegas is telling us it's a pick 'em on a neutral site. Texas A&M gets 3 points at home. I might say it's a little bit more for a Kyle Field night game. So to me, I mean, looking at this game though, you're completely right. Texas A&M has not faced a passing offense like LSU. I'm a little bit concerned with them on the back end of the defense if the front end of the defense is not getting home against this LSU offensive line, which is one of the best pass blocking teams in the country. So to me, I want to see that matchup. I want to see the wide receivers for LSU go up against the defenders for Texas A&M, because I know they're good, but it's a mix of talent, a lot of transfers on the back end of that defense. How are they going to play in their biggest matchup so far this year? That's the big question to me. I think that's the matchup to watch this weekend. And obviously games are won in the trenches. I think you've got good on good up front. Texas A&M's defense versus LSU's offensive line. That's gonna be a battle to watch. I kind of feel like you're gonna see each side of that win some matchups here and there. But if LSU's offensive line is winning some matchups, that means somebody's probably going to get open down the field, and I trust Nussmeier to find that person at some point. But how often is that going to happen, right? Is it happening every drive? Because if that's the case, you're in for a long day against LSU. They're gonna find that person if you're not getting the pass rush up front, and eventually they're going to find the end zone. They're going to be getting 3 points if nothing else, because they like to take deep shots. But ultimately, you gotta have good pass coverage on the back end if you're not getting home, and I think it's going to be tough to get home, consistently. Like we saw Georgia versus Texas, we saw Georgia get home almost every single drive, almost every single play. I mean, they were really getting at Quinn Ewers in that game, and it caused Quinn Ewers to not have time to find those open receivers, even though there were some open on the back end. I don't see that happening as much in this game, even as good as the Texas pass rush is. I don't see that happening every single play in a sense, or the majority of the plays. If it's a little bit more even, a little bit more split, what's the back end of that defense doing? I think that you completely nailed it, and I think that's the matchup to watch this week.
Absolutely. Look, and I just want to kind of point something out here. Texas A&M, you look at some of their opponents this season. Mississippi State is probably the best passing offense that Texas A&M has played this season. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, guys. I mean, Notre Dame can't pass. McNeese, Florida. At that point, Florida wasn't. Florida looks a little better right this second, but at that point in the season, I mean, come on. Bowling Green is actually not a bad passing team. It's a sneaky, decent passing team, but this team doesn't have a ton of experience this season against a team that throws the ball like that. And then if you look at LSU and who they've played this season, I mean, USC, they played South Carolina, who I think has got a pretty decent defense. Ole Miss, who I think has got a pretty decent defense. And they've scored 36 and 29 on those teams. So, uh, how does LSU? I think they're more battle tested at this point. I mean, I don't think there's any arguing that. And we've seen them up against some pretty tough defenses, and they've been able to be successful. Now, granted, Ole Miss, I would say the secondary is probably their weakness of their defense, but I still think it's somewhat decent. And you can definitely say that South Carolina's got a good defense. So scoring 36 on the road at South Carolina is pretty impressive. But I do think that Texas A&M is the best defense that LSU has faced this season. They will have been, and so I'm really interested to see how LSU's front is able to respond to that. Haven't given up a lot of sacks, Mason. Just like you said, they've been really, really good at protecting the quarterback. Last I saw, they had given up 2 sacks all year. It may be 3 or 4 by now, but I'm pretty sure it's right around that 2 mark, which is tops in the country. So LSU, I think, has got what they need to win this game. But I think this is going to be a really, really good football game.